The bulldozer's engine roared to life at 4 in the morning, and I knew right then my life was about to change forever. But honestly, after everything the HOA and the federal government had put me through, I did not care anymore. My name is Isaac Quinlan, and I am a veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. I came home to Bozeman, Montana, thinking I could finally live in peace, maybe enjoy the benefits I had earned through blood and sacrifice. Instead, I found myself trapped in a nightmare orchestrated by a homeowners association president named Patricia, a woman whose hobby seemed to be making everyone around her miserable. It all started 6 months ago when the snow began piling up on my roof. Montana winters are brutal, and that particular winter was worse than most. I was dealing with a back injury from my service, collecting disability benefits from the VA, and living as quietly as I could in my small house in the Meadowbrook Estates subdivision. The subdivision was nice enough, about 40 homes clustered together on the north side of Bozeman, with the Bridger Mountains visible from my bedroom window on clear days. Patricia Sullivan was the HOA president, and she had held that position for 8 years running. Nobody ever challenged her because, honestly, most people just wanted to live their lives without the drama. She was 52 years old, drove a white Lexus SUV, and spent most of her days patrolling the neighborhood looking for violations. Her blonde hair was always cut in that particular style that seemed to be a requirement for women who enjoy speaking to managers, and she wore expensive athletic wear despite never actually exercising. The first time she knocked on my door was in November. I answered, leaning heavily on my cane, and she stood there with her tablet, not even bothering to smile. "Mr. Quinlan, your grass is visible above the snow line by 2 inches in your backyard. HOA regulations state that grass must be maintained below 1 inch at all times, regardless of season." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was joking. "Madam, there is 2 feet of snow on the ground. The grass is dormant. It is winter. The regulations do not make exceptions for winter. I will need you to remedy this within 72 hours, or you will face a fine of $200 per day." She walked away before I could respond, her boots crunching on the packed snow of my driveway. That was Patricia. No discussion, no humanity, just rules and fines. I let it go because I had bigger problems. My roof was old, installed maybe 20 years before I bought the place, and the weight of the snow was making the support beams creak at night. I filed the paperwork with the HOA Architectural Committee to replace the roof, following every single guideline in their massive binder of regulations. The binder was 3 inches thick, printed on both sides, and covered everything from what color you could paint your mailbox to the exact angle your satellite dish could be mounted. 3 weeks later, I got the rejection letter. No explanation, just a stamp that said denied with Patricia's signature at the bottom. I called her immediately. "Patricia, I need to understand why my roof replacement was denied. The roof is failing. We have had record snowfall, and I am genuinely concerned it might collapse." "Mr. Quinlan, the Architectural Committee reviews these matters very carefully. Your proposed shingle color did not match the approved palette." I matched it exactly to the sample in the binder. I went to 3 different hardware stores to find the right one. "The committee has made its decision. You may reapply in 90 days. 90 days. Patricia, the roof might not last 90 days. Then I suggest you do a better job maintaining your property." She hung up. I sat there in my living room, looking up at a ceiling that seemed to sag a little more each day, and wondered what I was supposed to do. 2 weeks later, on a Friday night in December, I was heating up some soup when I heard a sound like a shotgun blast. The roof had partially collapsed over my bedroom, sending insulation, wood, and snow crashing down onto my bed. If I had been sleeping, I might have been seriously injured or killed. I called 911 and the fire department came out. They declared the house unsafe and red tagged it, meaning I could not legally live there until repairs were made. I grabbed what I could and checked into a motel on the highway, a place called the Sunset Lodge that charged $70 a night and smelled like cigarette smoke even in the non-smoking rooms. The next morning, I called my insurance company. That is when things went from bad to catastrophic. "Mr. Quinlan, I am looking at your policy, and I am afraid roof collapse due to snow load is not covered under your plan." "What do you mean it is not covered? That is what insurance is for. Your policy specifically excludes damage from lack of maintenance. Our records show you were warned about the snow load by the county inspector last month." "I was never warned by any inspector, and I tried to replace the roof, but the HOA would not let me." "Sir, we have documentation here that shows an inspection was performed and you were notified." "I am sorry, but we cannot cover this claim." I hung up and immediately requested the inspection report. When it arrived by email, I saw that the inspector had noted my address but had actually inspected the wrong house. Someone at the county had made a clerical error, but my insurance company was using it to deny my claim. I contacted a lawyer, but he told me that fighting the insurance company would cost more than just fixing the roof myself. The estimate for repairs came back at $48,000. My savings account had maybe $12,000 in it. That is when I decided to apply for an emergency VA loan. I had never used my VA benefits beyond my disability payments, and I figured this was exactly the kind of situation they were meant for. I filled out all the paperwork, provided documentation of the collapse, and submitted everything through the federal portal. Meanwhile, Patricia sent me a letter stating that my collapsed roof was an eyesore and violated HOA aesthetic standards. She was fining me $500 per day until it was fixed. When I explained that I was in a motel and could not access the house due to it being red tagged, she said that was not her problem. "The HOA bylaws are clear, Mr. Quinlan. Property must be maintained regardless of circumstances. If you cannot afford to live here, perhaps you should consider selling." The fines accumulated. After 2 weeks, I owed $7,000 to the HOA. Patricia filed a lien against my house, which meant I could not sell it even if I wanted to because the lien would have to be paid first. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in the motel room, eating Chinese takeout and watching old movies on cable. My disability check from the VA arrived on schedule, deposited directly into my account, and I used it to pay for another week at the motel and food. In January, I got a letter from the VA. My heart sank as I read it. "Dear Mr. Quinlan, due to a discrepancy in your housing status, your benefits have been temporarily frozen pending investigation. Our records indicate you are no longer residing at your registered address. Per regulations, VA benefits are contingent upon maintaining a permanent residence. Please contact our office to resolve this matter." I called immediately, but it was a Friday afternoon and the office was closed for the weekend. I called back Monday morning and spent 4 hours on hold before speaking to someone. "Sir, our system shows you are living in a motel. VA disability benefits require a permanent address." "I have a permanent address, my house." "The roof collapsed and I am temporarily displaced while I wait for approval on an emergency loan to fix it." "I see. And when did you apply for this loan?" 6 weeks ago. I am not showing any active loan applications under your name." My stomach dropped. "That is impossible." "I submitted everything through the federal portal. I have confirmation emails." "Sir, I am looking at your file right now, and there is no loan application. Perhaps you did not complete the submission process. I pulled up my emails on my phone, reading the confirmation number to her. She put me on hold for another 30 minutes, then came back. Mr. Quinlan, I found the issue. Your application was flagged for additional review due to the lien on your property. When we detected the lien, the application was automatically rejected. You should have received a notification. I never received anything. It looks like it was sent to your registered address, which has a collapsed roof and is red tagged. I cannot access my mail there. You need to update your mailing address in the system. Fine, I will do that right now, but what about my benefits? I need that money to survive. The freeze will remain in place until you establish a permanent residence. Once you do that, you can reapply for benefits. The process typically takes 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. I cannot afford to live without income for 6 to 8 weeks. I understand your frustration, sir, but these are the regulations. Is there anything else I can help you with today? I hung up without answering. My hands were shaking. I had $300 in my bank account, no income, a condemned house with a lien on it, and the HOA was adding $500 in fines every single day. I went to the VA office in person the next day. It was located in a federal building downtown Bozeman, a gray concrete structure that looked like it had been built in the 1960s and never updated. I waited for 3 hours to speak to someone, only to be told that everything had to be processed through the national system and there was nothing the local office could do. I served my country, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I got injured defending this country. And now I am being told I cannot get help because of a paperwork problem. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 30s, gave me a sympathetic look. I am sorry, Mr. Quinlan, I really am, but I do not make the rules, I just process the forms. I drove back to the motel, past my house where the blue tarp I had managed to throw over the collapsed section was now covered in fresh snow. The HOA had sent another letter, this one threatening legal action if the property was not brought into compliance within 30 days. That night, I lay in the motel bed and tried to figure out what to do. I had no income, no way to fix my house and mounting debt. I thought about my time in Afghanistan, about the things I had seen and done, about the friends I had lost. I had survived firefights and IED blasts. I had come home with shrapnel in my back and nightmares that woke me up screaming. And now, I was being destroyed not by enemy combatants, but by bureaucracy and a power-hungry HOA president. The next morning, I went to the Meadowbrook Estates HOA office, which was located in Patricia's house. She had converted her garage into an office, complete with a desk, filing cabinets, and a sign that said office hours, by appointment only. I knocked on her door without an appointment. She answered, looking annoyed. Mr. Quinlan, I do not have you scheduled. Patricia, I need to talk to you about these fines. My situation is impossible. The VA has frozen my benefits. I have no income. You cannot get blood from a stone. The HOA bylaws do not provide for hardship exceptions. You signed the covenant when you purchased your property. You agreed to abide by our standards. I am a veteran. I am disabled. I am asking for basic human decency here. Your service does not entitle you to special treatment, Mr. Quinlan. Everyone in this community has to follow the same rules, even when those rules are destroying someone's life. Perhaps you should have thought about that before you let your property fall into disrepair. Now, if you will excuse me, I have actual residents with appointments to attend to. She closed the door in my face. I stood there on her porch, looking at the perfectly shoveled walkway and the wreath on her door, and something inside me broke. I went back to the motel and started researching Patricia Sullivan. It did not take long to find some interesting information. She had been sued twice by previous residents of Meadowbrook Estates, both times settling out of court with non-disclosure agreements. She had no actual legal training but wielded the HOA bylaws like a weapon. Most damning, I found out that she had amended the bylaws 3 times in the past 5 years, always in ways that gave the HOA more power and herself more authority. I also discovered that she was not following proper procedures for most of her actions. The fines she was levying required a vote by the HOA board, but there had not been a board meeting in 8 months. She was essentially acting as a dictator, and everyone was too afraid or too apathetic to challenge her. I tried to rally the other homeowners. I sent emails, made phone calls, and knocked on doors. Most people were sympathetic but did not want to get involved. "Patricia is crazy," one neighbor told me. "If you stand up to her, she will make your life hell. Just pay the fines and move on." I cannot afford to pay the fines. I cannot even afford to fix my house. That is rough, man. But I have got kids and a job. I cannot afford to get into a war with the HOA. I understood. Everyone had their own problems, but it left me alone, fighting a battle I could not win. February brought more snow, the heaviest snowfall Bozeman had seen in 30 years. The roads were barely passable, even with the plows running around the clock. The temperature dropped to -15 degrees, and the motel's heating struggled to keep my room warm. My money ran out. I could not afford another night at the motel. I spent one night in my truck, running the engine every hour to keep from freezing, parked in a Walmart parking lot. The next morning, I swallowed my pride and went to a homeless shelter. The shelter was crowded, filled with people who had fallen through society's cracks just like I had. I lay on a thin mattress on the floor, listening to people cough and snore, and wondered how my life had come to this. I kept calling the VA. Every time, I got the same answer. My benefits were frozen. I needed to establish a permanent residence. The process would take 6 to 8 weeks once I submitted the proper paperwork. "I cannot establish a permanent residence without money," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "I cannot get money without my benefits. This is an impossible situation. I understand your frustration, sir." "No, you do not understand. If you understood, you would help me." The HOA fines continued to accumulate. I was now owing over $30,000, more than half the value of my house. Patricia sent a letter to the shelter, which I picked up from the forwarding address I had set up at the post office. The letter informed me that the HOA was initiating foreclosure proceedings. I sat in the public library, using their free computer and Wi-Fi, and read about HOA foreclosures. It was all legal. She could take my house for unpaid fines. Everything I had gone because my roof collapsed and I could not get help. That is when I started thinking about the bulldozer. My uncle owned a construction company about 40 miles outside Bozeman. I had worked for him summers during college and we had stayed in touch. I called him from the library phone. "Isaac, good to hear from you. How are things?" I told him everything. The roof, the HOA, the VA, all of it. "That is awful, man. What can I do to help?" "You still have that old Caterpillar D6 in your yard, the dozer?" "Yeah, it is sitting there. Things still runs, but we mostly use the newer equipment now." "Why?" "I need to borrow it." "Borrow it? For what?" "I need to clear some snow." He was quiet for a moment. "Isaac, you are not planning anything stupid, are you?" Define stupid. "Whatever you are thinking, do not do it. You are a veteran. You have got PTSD. You are not thinking clearly." "I am thinking perfectly clearly. That is the problem. I have tried everything legal, everything by the book. And I am losing everything anyway, so maybe it is time to stop playing by their rules." Isaac, please just come stay with me for a while. We will figure something out. I appreciate that, but this is something I need to do. Can I borrow the dozer or not? He sighed. You are going to get yourself arrested, probably. It will be on the news. I hope so. Another long pause. The keys are in it. If anyone asks, you stole it without my knowledge. Thank you. I hitchhiked to his property that afternoon. The bulldozer was sitting in a field, covered in snow but otherwise exactly as I remembered it. It was an older model, bright yellow paint faded to a dull mustard color, but the engine turned over on the third try. I had operated heavy equipment during my service, part of my job building forward operating bases in Afghanistan. A bulldozer was simpler than most of the specialized equipment I had used. The controls came back to me quickly. I spent an hour making sure everything worked. The blade raised and lowered smoothly. The tracks moved forward and backward. The engine ran rough but steady. Then I started driving. A bulldozer does not move fast. Top speed was maybe 7 miles per hour, but it does not care about snow. The massive tracks packed down everything in front of it, and the blade could push through drifts that would stop a normal vehicle cold. It took me 6 hours to reach Bozeman, following secondary roads where I was less likely to encounter police. I got some strange looks from people I passed, and one guy in a truck pulled up alongside me at a stop sign. You need some help? Nope, I am good, just clearing some snow in the middle of the road. Roads need clearing too. He shook his head and drove off. I kept going. By the time I reached the city limits, it was nearly midnight. The streets were mostly empty, just a few cars driving slowly through the packed snow. I navigated through downtown, the dozer's engine echoing off the buildings. I reached the federal building at 1 in the morning. It was a boxy concrete structure, 3 stories tall, housing various federal offices including the VA. The building was dark except for some security lights and a single window on the second floor where someone was apparently working late. I sat in the dozer for a few minutes, engine idling, looking at the building. This was the point of no return. Once I did this, there was no going back. I would be arrested. I would probably go to jail, but at least people would pay attention. At least someone would have to acknowledge what had happened to me. I lowered the blade and drove forward. The blade hit the front steps of the federal building with a grinding crunch. Concrete cracked and broke away. I raised the blade, repositioned, and hit it again. I was not trying to destroy the building, just make a point. Just force someone to pay attention. Alarms started blaring. Lights came on inside the building. I could see people moving behind the windows, probably calling the police. I made 3 more passes at the steps, each time breaking away more concrete before the first police car arrived. Then another. Then 4 more, all with lights flashing and sirens wailing. An officer got on his loudspeaker. Turn off the vehicle and step down immediately. I turned off the bulldozer and climbed down slowly, my bad back protesting every movement. I raised my hands above my head and stood there in the snow, in the cold, surrounded by police cars. Get on the ground. I got on my knees, then lay face down in the snow. Officers rushed forward, handcuffing me and patting me down. Are you armed? No, sir. What were you thinking, attacking a federal building? I was thinking maybe someone would finally pay attention. They hauled me to my feet and walked me to a police car. As they did, I saw news vans arriving. Someone had called the media. Good. That was exactly what I wanted. At the police station, they put me in an interrogation room. I sat there for what felt like hours before a detective came in. He was a heavy-set guy in his 50s with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt. Mr. Quinlan, I am Detective Morrison. You want to tell me what tonight was about? I want my story told. That is what tonight was about. Okay, I am listening. So I told him everything. The roof collapse, the HOA fines, the VA benefits freeze, all of it. He listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. That is a rough situation. But you understand you cannot just drive a bulldozer into a federal building, right? What was I supposed to do? I tried everything legal. Nobody would help me. So you committed a federal crime. I got their attention, did I not? He rubbed his face. Yeah, you got their attention. You are probably going to federal prison. At least in prison I will have a roof over my head and 3 meals a day. That is more than I have now. He left me alone again. I waited, exhausted but strangely calm. I had done what I needed to do. Whatever happened next, at least I had fought back. Around dawn, a federal agent came in. She was younger, maybe 30, wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase. Mr. Quinlan, I am Agent Reeves with the FBI. We need to talk about last night. Am I being charged federally? That depends. First, I need to understand if you are a threat to national security. You are a veteran with combat training who just attacked a federal building with heavy equipment. That raises some red flags. I am not a terrorist. I am a veteran who was failed by the system. I was not trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to make a point. By destroying federal property. By forcing people to pay attention. How much damage did I actually do? She consulted her briefcase. About $40,000 to the front entrance. Could have been worse, but the building is built to withstand much more than a bulldozer. Send me the bill. Add it to everything else I owe. She studied me for a long moment. You know your story is all over the news, right? Local stations picked it up, then national. It is trending on social media. Everyone wants to know about the veteran who drove a bulldozer through the snow to the federal building. Good. Maybe someone will actually do something about it. Maybe, but you are still looking at serious charges. Destruction of federal property, possibly domestic terrorism depending on how the prosecutor wants to play it. I am not a terrorist. I know. I read your file. 2 tours. Honorable discharge, Purple Heart. You are not the bad guy here, but you still broke the law in a pretty spectacular way. They kept me in jail for 3 days while they figured out what to charge me with. During that time, my story exploded. News crews went to Meadowbrook Estates and interviewed neighbors. They talked to Patricia, who made the mistake of appearing on camera. Mr. Quinlan was in violation of HOA regulations. We have standards to maintain. If he could not afford to live here, he should have made different choices. The interviewer pressed her. But he is a disabled veteran whose house was destroyed and whose benefits were frozen. You do not think the HOA could have shown some flexibility? The rules apply to everyone equally. We cannot make exceptions just because someone served in the military. The backlash was immediate and brutal. People dug into Patricia's history, finding the lawsuits and settlements. They discovered that she had used HOA funds to renovate her own home office without board approval. They found out about the amended bylaws and the lack of proper board meetings. News crews also went to the VA office. Someone leaked my file to a reporter, showing the frozen benefits and the rejected loan application. The reporter then connected with my insurance company, getting them to admit on camera that they had used an erroneous inspection report to deny my claim. By the 4th day, my story had become a national scandal. Veterans groups were holding protests. Politicians were calling for investigations. A GoFundMe appeared online to help with my legal fees and house repairs, and it raised over $200,000 in 48 hours. They moved me from the county jail to federal custody. My public defender, a sharp woman named Lisa Chen, came to see me. Mr. Quinlan, you are in a very strange position. The prosecution wants to make an example of you because you attacked a federal building. But public opinion is overwhelmingly on your side. Half of Congress is calling for the charges to be dropped. What do you think will happen? Honestly, I think they will offer you a deal. Plead guilty to a lesser charge, probably destruction of property, suspended sentence with probation and community service. They want this to go away, but they also need to show that actions have consequences. What if I do not take the deal? Then you go to trial, and it is a coin flip. A jury might acquit you out of sympathy, or they might convict you because what you did was clearly illegal. Are you willing to risk years in federal prison? I thought about it. What happens with the HOA? What happens with my benefits? That is the interesting part. The VA has already reinstated your benefits. They are calling it an administrative error that has been corrected. You will receive all your back pay. As for the HOA, the State Attorney General has opened an investigation into Patricia Sullivan and the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. There are allegations of fraud, embezzlement, and violations of Montana HOA laws. Embezzlement. Apparently, she has been skimming from the HOA dues for years. Once people started digging, they found all sorts of irregularities. She is likely going to face criminal charges. A few days later, Lisa came back with an offer. Plead guilty to misdemeanor destruction of property, 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and restitution of $40,000 for the damage to the federal building. The GoFundMe would more than cover the restitution. I took the deal. What choice did I have? I stood before a federal judge, admitted what I had done, and accepted responsibility for my actions. The judge, an older man with white hair and reading glasses, looked at me thoughtfully. "Mr. Quinlan, what you did was illegal and dangerous. However, I have read your file and I understand the circumstances that led to your actions. The system failed you in multiple ways, and you responded in a way that, while wrong, brought attention to serious problems. I am accepting this plea agreement, but I want you to understand that vigilante justice is not acceptable in our society. We have legal channels for addressing grievances." "Yes, Your Honor, I understand. But what happens when the legal channels do not work? Then you keep fighting through them. You do not give up, but you do not take the law into your own hands." "Respectfully, Your Honor, I tried for months. Nobody listened until I drove a bulldozer through the snow," he sighed. "I know, and that is something the system needs to address. But I cannot condone what you did, even if I understand why you did it. Sentence is entered as agreed. You are free to go." Walking out of the courthouse, I was immediately swarmed by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved in my face, and everyone was shouting questions. "Isaac, how do you feel? What is your message to other veterans? Do you regret what you did?" Lisa helped me push through to a waiting car. Inside, away from the chaos, I finally took a breath. "What now?" I asked. "Now you rebuild your life. The GoFundMe money is in escrow, waiting for you to access it. You can fix your house, pay off the HOA liens, and have money left over. Your benefits are restored. You have a second chance." "What about Patricia, arrested this morning?" The State Attorney General charged her with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of authority. She is looking at 5 to 10 years if convicted. The HOA board has been dissolved, and a court-appointed administrator is taking over until new elections can be held. I went back to Meadowbrook Estates for the first time in weeks. My house looked sad, the blue tarp sagging under the weight of fresh snow. But it was mine, and I had the means to fix it now. Over the next few months, I hired contractors to repair the roof properly. I used the GoFundMe money carefully, fixing not just the roof, but also updating the electrical and plumbing while the house was opened up. The work took 8 weeks, and I stayed with my uncle during that time, helping out with his construction business to stay busy. The community service hours were interesting. The judge assigned me to work with a veterans advocacy group in Bozeman, helping other veterans navigate the VA system. I helped dozens of people file their paperwork correctly, taught them how to appeal denied claims, and generally tried to spare them the nightmare I had gone through. Patricia's trial happened in August. I attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom. The prosecution laid out a damning case. She had embezzled over $300,000 from the HOA over 7 years. She had falsified board meeting minutes. She had accepted kickbacks from contractors who did work in the community. And she had systematically harassed homeowners who questioned her authority. The defense tried to paint her as a dedicated volunteer who had made some mistakes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted her on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 8 years in federal prison and ordered her to make full restitution to the HOA. When the verdict was read, Patricia showed emotion for the first time, breaking down in tears. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had destroyed her own life through greed and a need for control. But mostly, I felt relief that she could not hurt anyone else. Meadowbrook Estates held new HOA elections in September. The homeowners elected a board of 5 people, including myself. I was hesitant at first, but my neighbors convinced me. "You stood up to Patricia when nobody else would," one neighbor said. "You fought back against a corrupt system. We need people like you making decisions." Our first act as a new board was to completely rewrite the HOA bylaws. We simplified them dramatically, cutting the 3-inch binder down to a 20-page document focused on essential maintenance standards and community safety. We eliminated the ridiculous rules about grass height and satellite dish angles. We created a hardship exemption process for homeowners facing financial difficulties. And we put strict limits on the HOA president's authority, requiring board votes for any significant decisions. My house was finished in October, just as the first snow of the new winter began to fall. The new roof was solid, properly engineered to handle Montana's snow loads. I added extra insulation and new windows, making the whole place more energy efficient. The first night back in my own bed in my own house, I slept better than I had in a year. The Bulldozer incident followed me, of course. I became something of a folk hero in veteran communities, the guy who stood up to the bureaucracy in the most dramatic way possible. I gave a few interviews, always emphasizing that while I understood why I did what I did, it was not the right way to handle things. There were better ways to fight the system, but privately, I was not sure I believed that. Everything I had tried legally had failed. It was only when I did something dramatic and illegal that anyone paid attention. That was a depressing commentary on our society. I started a blog about HOA issues, helping homeowners across the country understand their rights and push back against abusive associations. It got surprisingly popular, with thousands of regular readers. I shared stories from people in every state, documenting the ways HOAs could make people's lives miserable. The VA also made some changes. A senator from Montana, embarrassed by the national attention on my case, pushed through legislation creating an emergency expedited review process for veterans facing housing crises. It was not perfect, but it was something. My story had created a tiny bit of positive change in a massive bureaucracy. A year after the Bulldozer incident, a documentary crew came to Bozeman to film my story. They interviewed me, my neighbors, Lisa Chen, Detective Morrison, even my uncle. They got footage of the repaired federal building entrance and my new roof. They tried to interview Patricia in prison, but she declined. The documentary, titled Bulldozer Justice, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and later aired on a major streaming service. It was strange watching my life turned into entertainment, but the filmmakers did a good job of showing the systemic issues that had led to my breaking point. After the documentary aired, I got letters from veterans across the country sharing their own stories of being failed by the system. Some were heartbreaking, others were infuriating. All of them reinforced that my experience was not unique, just more dramatic than most. I tried to help where I could, connecting people with resources, providing advice, sometimes just listening. It became a kind of mission for me, using my notoriety to help others avoid the pit I had fallen into. 2 years after everything happened, I was invited to speak at a veterans advocacy conference in Washington, D.C. I almost declined, uncomfortable with public speaking, but Lisa convinced me to go. Your story matters, Isaac. People need to hear it directly from you, not filtered through news reports or documentaries. So I went. I stood on a stage in front of 300 people and told my story. I talked about the roof collapse, the frozen benefits, the impossible bureaucracy, and yes, the bulldozer. I explained how desperation can push good people to bad decisions, and I urged the audience to fix the systems that created those desperate situations in the first place. The speech was well received. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to shake my hand, share their stories, and thank me for speaking out. A retired general told me I had more courage driving that bulldozer than many soldiers showed in combat. I was not sure I agreed, but I appreciated the sentiment. Flying home to Montana, looking down at the vast landscape below, I reflected on how much had changed. I had my house, my benefits, and my dignity back. Patricia was in prison. The HOA was functioning properly. The VA had made at least some improvements. My story had raised awareness about issues facing veterans and homeowners, but I also carried the weight of having committed a federal crime. I would be on probation for another year. My record would always show that conviction. Some people would always see me as a criminal rather than someone who had been pushed too far. Landing in Bozeman, driving through familiar streets to my home, I decided I could live with that. I had fought back against an unjust situation in the only way that seemed to work. I had paid the legal price for my actions, and I had maybe made things a tiny bit better for others facing similar problems. Life settled into a new normal. I continued my work with the Veterans Advocacy Group, completed my community service hours, and attended my monthly probation meetings without incident. The HOA board met quarterly, handling routine maintenance issues with minimal drama. Meadowbrook Estates was peaceful, the way a neighborhood should be. I even started dating again, meeting Jennifer Norton at a community barbecue the HOA organized. She was a nurse at the local hospital, recently divorced, with a dry sense of humor that matched my own. We took things slowly, both of us carrying baggage from our respective pasts, but it felt good to have someone to share dinners and walks with. 3 years after the incident, my probation ended. I met with my probation officer one last time, signing the final paperwork. "You have been one of my easier cases," she told me. "No violations, all requirements met ahead of schedule, and you have clearly used this experience constructively. I wish you the best, Mr. Quinlan." Walking out of that office, officially free of legal obligations, I felt lighter than I had in years. I drove to the federal building, now fully repaired with no sign of the damage I had caused, and stood across the street looking at it. A younger veteran approached me, someone I had helped through the advocacy group. "Isaac Quinlan, I thought that was you. How are you doing?" "Good, Marcus, really good." "You?" better, thanks to your help. I got my benefits approved and I am starting school next month using the GI Bill. That is fantastic. Proud of you for sticking with it. I wanted to ask, do you ever regret it? The bulldozer thing, I thought about it carefully. Regret is complicated. I wish the situation had never happened. I wish I had not been pushed to that point. But do I regret fighting back, even in a way that was illegal? No, I do not think I do. Sometimes you have to make noise before anyone listens. They are listening now. Some of them, anyway. It is a start. We talked for a few more minutes before Marcus headed off to work. I stayed there, looking at the federal building, thinking about everything that had happened. A police car pulled up and Detective Morrison got out. He was retired now, I knew, but still lived in Bozeman. Quinlan, thought I might find you here. Detective, how is retirement? Boring. My wife says I need hobbies. I told her investigating crime was my hobby. We stood there together, two guys who had been on opposite sides of a strange situation. I followed your case, Morrison said. Followed what you have been doing since. You turned it around. A lot of guys would have stayed angry, stayed bitter. You used it to help people. I stayed plenty angry. I just channeled it into something productive. That is all any of us can do. You know, I wrote a letter to the judge before your sentencing. I figured you should know that. You did. Yeah. I told him what you did was wrong, but that I understood it. I told him about the research I did into your situation, all the ways the system had failed you. I recommended leniency. I think it helped get you that plea deal. I did not know what to say. Thank you, that means a lot. You are welcome. Just do not drive any more bulldozers into buildings, okay? I am retired. I do not want to have to come back to arrest you again. He clapped me on the shoulder and walked away. I watched him go, then turned back to the building one more time. A news van pulled up and I recognized the reporter who had first covered my story. She got out with a cameraman, Mr. Quinlan. Sarah Martinez from Channel 7. I am doing a follow-up piece on your story. Do you have time for a quick interview? I hesitated, then nodded. Sure, why not? She positioned me with the federal building in the background, a deliberate choice that was not lost on me. We are here with Isaac Quinlan, 3 years after the incident that made national headlines. Mr. Quinlan, looking back, what would you say to other veterans or anyone really who feels like the system is failing them? I looked directly at the camera. I would say do not give up. Keep fighting through legal channels. Document everything. Find advocates and allies. Use resources like veteran service organizations and legal aid. And if you are part of the system, if you work for an HOA or a federal agency or anywhere that serves the public, remember that the rules you enforce affect real people's lives. A little compassion and flexibility can prevent tragedies. And what about the bulldozer? You stand by that decision. I broke the law, and I paid the price for that. I am not encouraging anyone to do what I did. But I will say this. Sometimes the only way to get people to pay attention is to do something that cannot be ignored. I wish it was not that way, but it is the reality. Power does not give up easily, and bureaucracies do not change without pressure. You have become an advocate for HOA reform and veterans' rights. What changes still need to happen? HOAs need stronger state oversight. There should be legal protections against the kind of abuse I experienced. Veterans' benefits should have emergency provisions for crisis situations. Insurance companies should not be able to deny claims based on clerical errors. And fundamentally, we need to remember that systems exist to serve people, not the other way around. Thank you, Mr. Quinlan. Any final thoughts? Just that I am grateful for how things turned out. I am grateful for the support I received. I am grateful I did not hurt anyone during my moment of desperation. And I am committed to making sure other veterans do not have to go through what I went through. The interview ended, and Sarah thanked me. As they were packing up, she said, "Your story really resonated with people. I still get emails about it. You tapped into something a lot of people feel, this frustration with systems that are supposed to help but often just make things worse. I hope something good comes from it. It already has. I have done 3 follow-up stories on HOA reforms in Montana. The legislature has passed 2 new laws regulating HOA behavior. That is directly because of the attention your case brought." After they left, I walked around downtown Bozeman for a while, enjoying the spring weather. The snow was melting, revealing brown grass and muddy ground, the promise of renewal. In a few weeks, everything would be green again. I stopped for coffee at a small shop near the university. While waiting in line, I overheard 2 students talking. "Did you see that documentary about the Bulldozer guy? That was insane." "I know, right? But I kind of get it. Sometimes you just reach a breaking point. Still, driving a bulldozer into a federal building, that is next level." I smiled to myself and ordered my coffee. I had become a cautionary tale, a folk hero, a case study in desperation and rebellion. I was okay with that. Walking home, I passed Meadowbrook Estate's entrance sign. Someone had planted flowers around it, bright yellows and purples that added color to the community. The neighborhood looked good, well maintained but not oppressively regulated. Kids were playing in yards. People were walking dogs. It felt like a real community rather than a prison of rules. At home, Jennifer was waiting on my porch. We had plans to drive up to the mountains for a hike, taking advantage of the nice weather before her night shift at the hospital. "How did it go?" she asked. "Probation is officially over. I am a fully free man." "That is worth celebrating. How about we stop for lunch after the hike?" "Sounds perfect." We drove up into the mountains, following a trail that offered stunning views of the valley below. Halfway up, we stopped to rest, sitting on a boulder and looking out at the landscape. "You think about it a lot?" Jennifer asked. "Everything that happened, every day." "It is not something you forget, but it does not consume me anymore. It is part of my story, but it is not the whole story." "What is the whole story?" "Still being written, I guess. That is the nice thing about life. You can always start a new chapter." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching clouds move across the sky. My phone buzzed with a message from another veteran I was helping, asking advice about a denied benefits claim. I would answer it later after the hike. The work would always be there. People would always need help navigating broken systems. But right now, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. On a mountain, with someone I cared about, enjoying the simple fact of being alive and free. That night back home, I made dinner while Jennifer got ready for work. She was pulling a double shift and I packed her a lunch to take along. "You do not have to do that," she said. "I know, I want to." After she left, I sat on my porch with a beer, looking up at the stars. Montana skies were incredible at night, vast and clear, full of more stars than seemed possible. I thought about all the nights in Afghanistan when I had looked at similar skies, wondering if I would make it home. I had made it home, but the fight had not ended there. It had just changed forms. My phone rang. It was a reporter from a national newspaper working on an article about HOA abuses. We talked for an hour, and I shared my experiences and insights. By this point, I had done dozens of these interviews, and I had learned how to tell my story in a way that connected with people while also highlighting the broader issues. Over the following months, I testified before the Montana state legislature about proposed HOA reform legislation. I appeared on a podcast about veterans' issues. I wrote an op-ed for a major newspaper arguing for VA system improvements. My voice had become part of a larger conversation about how we treat veterans and how we govern our communities. The work was meaningful, but it was also exhausting. Every interview required me to relive the worst period of my life. Every testimony meant facing hostile questions from people who thought I was just a troublemaker. Every op-ed brought angry emails from HOA board members who thought I was unfairly attacking them. But the positive responses outweighed the negative. For every angry email, I got 10 from people thanking me for speaking out. For every hostile legislator, there were 3 who genuinely wanted to make improvements. Change was happening slowly, but it was happening. One evening, I got a call from my old military commander, Colonel Anderson. We had not spoken in years. "Quinlan, I heard about your situation. I wanted to reach out, see how you are doing. We talked for a long time." He told me he had followed the news coverage and was impressed by how I had turned a crisis into advocacy. "You always were a fighter," he said. "Even in Afghanistan, when things went to hell, you kept fighting. I am glad you are still fighting, just in a different way now." "I did not have much choice, sir. We always have choices. You chose to stand up for yourself and others. That takes courage. I am proud of you." Those words meant more than he probably knew. I had spent years feeling like I had let everyone down by not handling things the right way. Hearing my old commander say he was proud helped heal something I did not even know was still wounded. As my 4th year after the incident approached, I was invited to speak at a TED conference. The topic was "When Systems Fail: A Veteran's Story of Desperation and Advocacy." I almost said no, intimidated by the venue and audience, but Jennifer convinced me. "Your story needs to be told on the biggest platforms possible. This is your chance to reach millions of people." The TED talk was terrifying. I stood on that red circle, under bright lights, and poured out my story to an audience of influential people from around the world. I talked about the roof collapse, the frozen benefits, the bulldozer, and everything that came after. I talked about systemic failures and individual responsibility. And I ended with a call to action. Fix the systems before they break more people. The talk went viral, getting millions of views online. It sparked new conversations about HOA reform, veterans' benefits, and the desperation that drives good people to extreme actions. Major news organizations picked it up. Politicians referenced it in speeches. It became part of the cultural conversation. With the attention came opportunities. A publisher reached out about writing a book. A veterans advocacy organization offered me a paid position as a consultant. A law school invited me to do a guest lecture series on bureaucratic failure and legal recourse. I said yes to the book, no to the job, and maybe to the lectures. I wanted to help, but I also needed to maintain my own life. Jennifer and I were getting serious, talking about moving in together. The HOA board needed my participation. My advocacy work with local veterans was important. I could not let my story consume my entire life. Writing the book took a year. It was harder than I expected, revisiting every detail of those dark months. My editor pushed me to be honest about my mental state, my thoughts of suicide when things seemed hopeless, my rage at the systems that failed me. It was emotionally brutal, but the book that emerged was raw and powerful. Bulldozer Justice: A Veteran's Fight Against Broken Systems, published 5 years after the incident. It sold well, particularly among veterans and people dealing with HOA issues. I did a modest book tour, appearing at veterans centers and independent bookstores rather than major chains. At one event, an elderly veteran approached me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you for writing this. I thought I was the only one who felt this way, like the system we served had abandoned us. Knowing I am not alone helps." That made everything worthwhile. The interviews, the scrutiny, the reliving of trauma, all of it was worth it if my story helped people feel less alone. Patricia was released from prison after serving 5 years with good behavior. I heard about it through the community grapevine. She moved to a different state, and I hoped she found some peace. What she did was wrong, but destroying her life forever would not help anyone. The Montana legislature passed comprehensive HOA reform, creating an oversight board and establishing clear protections for homeowners. It was not perfect, but it was progress. The bill's sponsor credited my story with providing the political will to push it through. The VA implemented new emergency procedures for veterans facing housing crises, creating a rapid response team that could expedite benefits in specific situations. Again, not perfect, but better than before. Insurance companies in Montana were required to provide more transparent denial processes, with easier appeals and penalties for using erroneous information. My case had been cited as an example of why these regulations were necessary. Small victories, each one built on my story and the stories of countless others. The system was still flawed, but it was marginally better. That was something. 6 years after the Bulldozer incident, Jennifer and I got married. It was a small ceremony in the mountains, just close friends and family. My uncle was there, joking that he should have charged me rental fees for the Bulldozer. My old commander flew in from Georgia. Even Detective Morrison attended, giving me a handshake and a warning to stay out of trouble. "I think I am done driving heavy equipment into buildings," I assured him. "Good. I am too old to chase you down now." Standing there with Jennifer, surrounded by people who had supported me through everything, I felt genuinely happy for the first time in years. I had been through hell, made terrible choices, paid the price, and somehow come out the other side with a life worth living. During the reception, several people asked me for advice about their own situations with HOAs or veterans benefits. I helped where I could, exchanging contact information and promising to follow up. The work never really ended. As the sun set over the mountains, Jennifer and I snuck away from the party for a few minutes alone. "No regrets?" she asked. "About marrying you?" "Never." I meant about everything else. I thought about it. Regrets are complicated. I regret that I was put in that situation. I regret that the system failed so badly. But I do not regret fighting back, even though I did it wrong. And I do not regret where I ended up. Without all that, I would not be here with you right now. That is a very philosophical way of looking at having committed a federal crime. I have had a lot of time to think about it. We stood there holding hands, watching the last light fade from the sky, ready to start our new life together. Behind me was a past filled with trauma and mistakes. Ahead was a future full of possibility. In the present, I had everything I needed. The Bulldozer was still at my uncle's construction yard, gathering rust and becoming part of local legend. Occasionally, people would stop to take pictures of it, the famous Bulldozer from the news story. My uncle thought about getting rid of it but decided to keep it as a reminder that sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. I visited it once, a couple of years after everything. I sat in the operator's seat, hands on the controls, remembering that long, cold drive through the snow. I remembered the desperation, the anger, the sense that this was my only option left, and I remembered the consequences, both legal and personal. "Would you do it again?" my uncle asked. I hope I would never be in that situation again. But if I was, honestly, I do not know. I would like to think I would find a better way, but I also know how it feels when every door is closed and every system has failed. Desperation makes you do things you never imagined yourself capable of. Well, if you ever need to borrow heavy equipment again, maybe give me more notice, I laughed. Deal. Life continued. Jennifer and I bought a bigger house outside the HOA with land where I could not bother anyone and nobody could bother me. I kept my old house as a rental, providing affordable housing for another veteran. I continued my advocacy work, now with more resources and connections. I even started a nonprofit organization focused on helping veterans navigate bureaucratic systems. The organization, called Cleared Path, provided free assistance to veterans dealing with benefits issues, housing problems, and HOA disputes. We had volunteer lawyers, caseworkers, and other veterans who had been through similar situations. It grew from just me working out of my house to a small office with 5 staff members. Every time we helped a veteran avoid the kind of crisis I had faced, I felt like my experience meant something. Every approved benefits claim, every resolved HOA dispute, every prevented foreclosure was a victory against the systems that had nearly destroyed me. 10 years after the Bulldozer incident, I was invited back to the federal building for a ceremony. They were unveiling a plaque about the history of the building, and they wanted me there as part of it. I was hesitant, unsure why they would want someone who had attacked the building to be part of celebrating it. The VA director for Montana explained over the phone. Your story led to real changes. We want to acknowledge that. Yes, what you did was illegal, but it exposed serious problems that we needed to fix. The plaque will mention the incident as a turning point in how we serve veterans. So I went, standing in front of the building where I had committed a federal crime, watching them unveil a plaque that mentioned me by name. It talked about the history of the building, the services it provided, and the reforms that had been implemented after a veteran's desperate act brought attention to systemic failures. It was surreal, being honored in a way for something I had been punished for. But it also felt right, an acknowledgement that sometimes progress comes from uncomfortable places. After the ceremony, a young VA employee approached me. Mr. Quinlan, I wanted to thank you. I started working here 5 years ago after all the reforms. The training now emphasizes understanding the real impact of our decisions on veterans' lives. Your story is part of that training. It reminds us that we are not just processing paperwork. We are affecting real people. That conversation stayed with me. My desperate act had become a teaching tool, a reminder to bureaucrats that their decisions mattered. It was not the legacy I would have chosen, but it was a meaningful one. As I write this, 15 years have passed since that cold night when I drove a bulldozer through the snow to a federal building. I am 52 years old now. Jennifer and I have 2 kids, adopted siblings who needed a home. My advocacy organization has helped thousands of veterans. The HOA reforms we fought for have spread to other states. My story has become part of the larger conversation about how we treat veterans and how we govern communities. I still carry the weight of what I did. The conviction is on my record forever. Some people will always see me as a criminal rather than a desperate man pushed too far. I accept that. What matters more is that something good came from it, that my breaking point became a catalyst for change. The bulldozer is gone now, finally scrapped after sitting in my uncle's yard for over a decade. But the story lives on, told and retold, adapted and analyzed. It has become bigger than me, a symbol of resistance against uncaring systems and bureaucratic cruelty. I look back on that version of myself, sleeping in a shelter, drowning in debt, with benefits frozen and no way forward, and I barely recognize him. The desperation that drove me to such an extreme act feels distant now, like it happened to someone else. But I remember the emotions, the rage and helplessness and determination to be heard at any cost. To anyone reading this who feels that same desperation, I want you to know, there is a way forward even when you cannot see it. Reach out for help, find advocates, document everything. Use every legal resource available. And remember that your life has value beyond whatever crisis you are facing. But I also want you to know, I understand. I understand what it feels like when the systems fail you. I understand the rage that comes from being abandoned by the very institutions that promise to help you. I understand the desperation that makes extreme acts seem like the only option. I do not encourage anyone to do what I did. The legal consequences alone are severe, and I was fortunate not to hurt anyone. But I will not condemn that version of myself either, because he was doing the only thing he knew how to do, fighting back. The best outcome is that you never need to understand that desperation. That the systems work as they should. That HOAs show compassion. That veterans' benefits flow smoothly. That insurance companies act fairly. That bureaucracies remember they serve people, not the other way around. But if you do find yourself in that dark place, remember, you are not alone. Others have been there. Others have survived. Others have fought their way back to the light, and sometimes, just sometimes, that fight changes things for everyone who comes after. I am Isaac Quinlan. I am a veteran. I am an advocate. I am a husband and father. I am someone who made a terrible decision in an impossible situation. I am someone who paid the price and tried to make something good from it. And I am still here, still fighting, just with better tools and better methods than a bulldozer. That is my story. Not the simple version you see in headlines or documentaries, but the complicated reality of what happens when systems fail and people break and somehow, against all odds, things get a little bit better. The sun sets over Montana tonight like it does every night, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. My kids are doing homework at the kitchen table. Jennifer is making dinner. Bills are paid, the roof is solid, and benefits arrive on schedule. It is a normal, beautiful, precious life. And I fought like hell to get here.